Who wants to go for it? 8 hours.
That is
That's
this meeting's new schedule.
Should start dinner. Cancel dinner.
Amazing.
8 hours. All right. Welcome everyone. Hello. Exciting month, right? Ed and I were talking about the meeting this month, and like the first thing he said was, "You don't have to plan a topic. This one sort of writes itself." There was a lot of good stuff announced last week. And, I mean, right from the keynote all the way through the week, I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, right from the keynote, right? No, it was so far removed from what Steve Jobs used to do with the sales figures and numbers, and this was just a developer keynote for developers and techies, which I thought was great for a developer event, which hadn't been the case. It used to just be sort of like this PR circus. Did anyone go besides Ed? Tigerman got to go. Did anyone else actually attend in person? Yeah, just curious.
Live streaming keynote was the best I could do.
Live streaming the keynote and all the session videos. And the session videos, so last year was the first year that they made them available, the videos available the day of. Amazing. But you still needed a developer ID account to log in and see them. This year they're free for account or not, which is even better. So this was an interesting event. iOS, good stuff. Is anyone running 8 already? You are. Yeah, I have it on test device. Oh, a bunch of hands.
Well, it's kind of necessary for us to stay ahead of it.
Yeah.
And to report bugs as necessary.
Do you have it on the test device or your primary?
I have it on the work device.
Yeah, okay. So you have some spare device you can fall back to.
Yeah, I mean, if I can't tweet from Siri, I mean, I'm tired, like, I'm handicapped at that point.
So, but it's...
I couldn't get a keyboard to function after I dictated the tweet, so I had to go back to the other devices that I have everywhere within arm's reach.
Yeah. I was running it.
I think they're dog fooding keyboards. There's a possibility what's going on there with extensions, and that's why the keyboards are crazy bad.
Really?
When you rotate, you lose a lot of functionality.
Oh, I didn't even...
General OS system alerts, like built in the settings app. I'm trying to enter credentials. The keyboard is off the screen.
It's off the screen.
Well, again, early days. I'm going to probably say that a bunch of times. Early days for everything. But yes, you're right. It's the time to test it and file bugs.
Yeah. It was like that for 7.2 when 7 came out.
The same.
Keyboard was so.
But this is definitely, these beta bits are very beta.
I'm really on a production device, like my only phone, and it's quirky, but it's functional. I mean, I haven't had anything that's been like, yeah, I mean, nothing that's been like, all right, I really need to back right now.
I made an iPhone running 8, my only primary phone, last week, and like nothing stopped me from doing the basics, phone calls, all that stuff worked.
Yeah.
Some stuff was a little crashy, but overall it looks good. I think I went back to my Android for a number of reasons, but I will go back and look at iOS 8 once they add more of the things they were talking about. So like the first preview, all those great things from the keynote, hotspot automatic activation and continuity, they're not there yet, so we can't test them. But I'm definitely interested in those. So continuity, I'm kind of curious how people feel about it. Like, is continuity just sort of this geek dream of like, this is amazing? Or is it something, do you think, that actual people will actually use and actually care about?
I think people who are totally in the ecosystem, it'll definitely be useful for them. Assuming it works how they showed it, you just pull up to your computer and there you go, the email's there. But for tech people, I think someone like me, I use the Mailbox app. I don't use the built-in app. Will it work with third-party apps? I'm assuming it won't hand it off.
There's an API that developers will have to conform to, and they expect that.
That's the only thing that I was concerned with. I'm like, oh, that's great, but I don't use the Mail app, and a lot of the IT people that I work with, they don't use the Mail app either.
The Mail app is always pretty awful, but I think Mail's the least compelling. reason to use continuity, because you always have a drafts folder. You can always kind of pick up mail where you left off. That's not interesting to me at all. But the idea maybe of I'm working on my laptop, and my iPad knows that I'm working on this numbers document, and I'm going to go to a meeting. I can just grab this and go. That's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Has anyone seen the reports of not actually ads, right? But
Starbucks.
yeah, these
Starbucks
application
Certain third parties are able to show on the lock screen.
home screen. I don't know how anyone feels about that. I saw a lot of negative reaction to it, but I think it's kind of interesting. I'm not opposed to going, if I'm going to a Starbucks, I'm not opposed to something on my iPad tying into that and saying, or iPhone saying, hey, here's this app that.
Well, I mean, after iBeacon, you would assume that you've installed an app, you've allowed it to look at your location, and therefore you're, by association, you're possibly allowing proximity notifications.
Yeah, but this happened without anyone.
Realizing that Apple had been working with Google to allow this functionality in their apps, Starbucks.
Yeah, it doesn't happen anymore.
But the proximity.
Bing translates great. Bing translates awesome.
But I still look at continuity as a feature that it's like, what's one better than AirDrop actually going in between gosh darn devices? And how much normals or how much regular people are going to use it is like, are they going to use it more than Dashboard? Yes. Well, then it's probably worth the engineering effort to get out the door compared to how they hold in Confabulator.
That's one of them that I think we'll see. But
I think the biggest thing with respect to continuity is whether or not it actually works.
Right.
To begin with.
And therefore you have to keep the scope small, is why I would understand it only being for Apple's
But I mean,
apps.
iCloud and MobileMe were so
Gloriously well
executed
executed,
that
yeah.
I think that if it relies on the iCloud or Apple ID infrastructure to get the handoff completed, assuming that is actually working correctly,
I would be shocked
that's
if it's going over the WAN.
Well,
Yeah, I doubt it's.
Well, then,
Or even the local network.
Because you have to be on the wire. You have to be on Wi-Fi though in order to do it, don't you? You can't. If your phone has.
It all remains to be seen.
It actually creates an ad hoc wireless network between the two devices using an extra. It works similar to how
AirDrop?
works now.
Okay.
That's my guess. Is it's all proximity based to whatever your device is.
Using what kind of antenna?
One of the Wi-Fi.
So the
Well,
fact
the
that you have dual
Wi-Fi,
band, right, built into the chipset on the, well, not chipset, it's physically hardware that there's radios present, but all that's kind of speculation-y.
Right.
But
the question
it's
is,
also
if you
if
turn
it
Wi-Fi
actually
off on the
works.
device, or if you turn Wi-Fi off on your laptop and you're connected over an Ethernet connection, does it still work, or can it still be doing? It would strike me as a little bit.
That doesn't seem like
almost dangerous. Let's say you're sitting on an airplane, right? And it's during the time when you're not allowed to use Wi-Fi transmitters. You have your.
Let's face it, that's nonsense.
What's nonsense?
that people are actually going to voluntarily turn it off in the first place, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or that it's affecting in-flight
It's not
communications.
affecting
That's
right.
that's
Like,
clear,
been,
but
that's been clear since I think the time that dawned on me ages ago.
right.
What even before iPhones and things, the Nintendo DS had built-in Wi-Fi. And I just remember kids on planes playing. I'm like, there's no way all these kids turned on Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
There's no possible way.
Yeah.
So
the parents are going to be able to go to that
just
for
no-
them either.
No way.
Well, plus it's pretty clear that just due to the power of the transmitter that's in these things, they cap out at like 600 milliamps, I think it is. So if they're going to get interference from those kind of bands, they're going to be experiencing greater amplitudes of that in the cockpit from outside radio antennas that are much
I
more
think here's the
powerful.
bottom line. If there was any chance that turning on a radio in your cell phone is going to cause this plane to dive, you wouldn't be allowed on the flight with it.
Right.
That would be like you just flat out
Yeah, it would be in
surrender your
carry-on.
mobile phone.
Or wouldn't be in carry-on.
You just wouldn't be allowed.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So just
But anyway, back to what I was talking about though. If you turn Wi-Fi off, let's say you, for some reason, believe your
your airline pilot, and you turn Wi-Fi off on your cell phone and your computer, can it still use continuity and pass the thing back and forth? Is it actually using a built-in Wi-Fi antenna to do that? I would think it probably wouldn't. So it's still, because then Apple would be, violating FCC rules and.
Right.
If I know Apple like I know Apple, I'm sure there's a certain amount of magic that would make that kind of thing function in most circumstances. But I think that in the case that you're turning off Wi-Fi and turning off Bluetooth, I don't think continuity would work.
Well, that's
probably
not
true,
the
yeah.
case that they're optimizing for, at the very least. The one use case that they're going to optimize for is people who never plug in. But I think that low-power Bluetooth is possibly more likely, considering they're talking about using it for phones as well, being able to initiate calls, being able to answer calls, and the fact that iBeacon has all of this potential that hasn't gone anywhere yet. But they're doing all of this work with Bluetooth.
Well,
It could
also,
be.
again, very new. People haven't figured out what to do.
There's also a lot
The
of
barrier to entry of having it be in an app, that being the basic requirement of that an app has to be the receiving end of, hey, okay, I found an iBeacon, what am I going to do with it? Is the limiting factor there. But I think there's going to be a lot of Bluetooth-enabled things, since low-power Bluetooth really is a very efficient way and low battery way of making it happen.
Yeah.
I've been looking into iBeacons as far as physical hardware is concerned, and there are also quite a few choices out there. So the feature set that you're after can be dictated by which type of iBeacon you're trying to get. Some of them have more than just informatics capabilities. Some of them have more sensors in them, and a lot of those aren't available to the open market just yet.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people, like myself included, are interested in more than just sending information back and forth. It's more about, collection and storage of data.
Right.
One that I was just reading about, I forget the name of it, escapes me at the moment. It has built-in accelerometer, which for what I'm looking to do with them would be a pretty important piece of my puzzle. But the only way that you can get them is you have to apply to be a developer. You only get 3 iBeacons. It's not that kind of hardware isn't as far along as a lot of people would really like it to be, and it's not the hardware that is available isn't as feature full as a lot of the stuff that.
And then you have to build upon it. So
Correct.
you have iBeacons right here,
Yeah, exactly.
and you have all the stuff in it, but you got to build.
And
build the
someone like
functionality.
myself, who's a networking person and not in any way, shape, or form a programmer, that's the huge barrier to entry, which I think Swift may have helped with a little bit, but probably not enough for me at least.
Dayphone and iPhone.
Working.
Oh.
So that while he's on one phone, he can email with the other phone.
Yeah.
Wife phone and mistress phone.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Breaking Bad.
iOS. Is there something else that I'm missing? Something big, because that's not my primary.
Inline reply to text messages and other alerts. Kind of cool.
Yeah.
The walkie-talkie functionality within the Messages app is kind of cool.
Well, less about.
I'm not sure I'll
It's
ever do that.
Well,
but maybe some people will.
Cool, not particularly useful.
Maybe it is to certain
Well,
people. I will probably never. Do that.
Honestly, the announced that I just had the vision of my daughter doing that constantly.
Yeah.
13-year-olds, I
Kids
love
will.
that. 14-year-olds.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
probably easier if you need hands-free. That's where I can see it being useful, maybe in
Driving.
a car, driving or something, and instead of, I use that functionality all the time on my Android because it knows I'm driving.
Yeah.
It automatically goes into driving mode. It will read a text to me when the text shows up, and then I can voice reply. But that does speech recognition, which usually is pretty good. The time you're driving along and something's horribly wrong, and now you're like, how the hell do I correct that? It has an option just to delete. You're like, send or delete, and then I'm not going to edit one word. I'm just going to delete and say it again and hope that it figures it out right the next time. Whereas the speech thing, you have a person on the other end, they're going to decode it, they'll figure it out. So I can see it being useful for hands-free operation.
But I still think the killer iOS 8 app or element is the automagical hotspot.
Yeah.
On your machine,
Yeah.
on your Mac, just go turn on a hotspot on the
Oh, yeah.
internet.
I would do that all the time if
Yeah.
it weren't for the pain in the ass
Yeah.
factor with the current system of go in, turn the whole thing. I don't want it running all the time.
I would do it all the time if I wasn't grandfathered into unlimited data.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Agreed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
That's the kind of integration that Apple should be delivering.
Yes.
I find that unlimited data is the only compelling reason to actually, like that personal hotspot is the only compelling reason to need
Yes,
unlimited data. So
absolutely.
you're kind of in a catch-22 there.
Yes, no, I find I don't use up that much data.
Exactly.
I actually switched.
But if I was
off
using it as a
of
personal
unlimited
hotspot, I
plan.
would
Yeah,
all the
that's
time.
a hotspot.
If you go
Never
over
really
like 5
downloaded
gigs,
it,
AT&T
iOS.
texts you and tells you. that
No, but I might
you
watch some
over
Netflix
again.
Netflix streaming
Which I did
somewhere.
last month, but haven't done in a year.
I have 3 gigs a month. I
It's-
haven't gone over 3 gigs in months, and the last time I did, I was working off-site the majority of the time.
You don't have
It's just a matter. Yeah, it's social. It's kids, and
Mhm.
the other thing, it's not having to ever think about it.
Mhm.
It's like,
Right.
oh, I want to watch something on
Yeah.
Netflix. Better make sure my Wi-Fi's on. So, I'll watch it. Oh, it's fast enough. I don't care. Yeah. But yeah, it's not. I think the hotspot makes it worth switching. And then of course the other two, the Mac integration where it shows you caller ID, which was excellent when they demoed it in 1998.
Yes.
That was fantastic. I remember it being at Macworld in 1998 and having them demo that feature and going, yeah, that's really cool.
You guys did it.
Also, being able to pass off the SMS messages into iMessage on the desktop is going to be huge.
You don't have Google Voice. That's pretty good.
Yeah. I'd say those ones that
You didn't
have
already
Google
have
Voice,
that.
you've already had those.
So I am curious about
But no, it's good.
now that means they need to be a proxy for your SMS messages, and I'm not crazy about that. Not because of privacy or I think that they're doing anything with them, but because iMessage is already so horrifically bad at delivering. So that's what makes me worry.
The mail must go through.
It's
Yeah,
awful.
but-
like so again, I'm not an iMessage person.
I don't have a lot of
My
green
wife and
friends.
Kids complain about this all the time. Texted you, why didn't you answer me? I never got it. And then like 5 minutes after they're yelling at each other, bing!
There it goes.
Oh, there it is. Like,
But that's going to be a local handoff, though. If the text came through here,
no,
it's
not a
got to be
text.
passing
iMessage
off.
to iMessage
Yeah.
goes through Apple.
Well, yes.
Over Wi-Fi. It's over data.
But this
So-
additional functionality that we're talking about it being able to now pass off an SMS message or a text message, whatever, to the iMessage app, and that part's all going to happen locally. It's not going to be like,
Right, but what Tim Cook claimed was now you can iMessage your green level friends. So that means
Well,
they're
yeah,
proxying
in the other
SMS
direction.
somewhere,
yeah.
and that makes me horrifically uncomfortable.
But
because
isn't
it's
it-
so bad?
Isn't it going to happen through your iPhone? Well, are you going to be able to iMessage your SMS friends if you don't own an iPhone or an iPad or any other device that could
I don't know.
transmit
You
a
mean
text
from your
message? Right.
Mac? I have no idea. I'll have to wait to see.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
That's a good question, though.
Well, I mean, the entire thing of iOS being somewhat boring to me as a topic, besides just needing it to be stable for work, like for the functionality that we use it for at work.
Moving on to the Mac.
Well, no, it's like they used to have a Back to the Mac.
Yes.
That was an actual theme.
Yeah.
And this time it was kind of like not about, hey, we have this great stuff for the Mac. Oh my gosh, it's going to be like the big reveal at the end that not only in the beginning do we show you a new iOS 70 type turnaround in look, but in the end we show you that we're actually giving a good gosh darn about our platform's proprietary language. But it was the fact that everything they had was cross-platform by
Right.
default. Like
It's kind of kept everything on equal footing, right?
Yeah.
And-
every
It was
conversation.
11 minutes into the keynote before they mentioned macOS 10.
Still.
And
there
the
was a lot
big,
of
show the
ways
big
down
videos like, we love you developers. Here's a video about developers, and it was about
of the iPad and
iPad and iOS developers.
But that is
Well, I mean,
probably
it's-
90% of the developer community, at least.
Maybe, but I mean, that was the message. Like being there this year, it was
Right, but to
basically
develop for iOS, you need a Mac.
Yep.
and
So they
to
get you.
and to read about Swift, you need an iOS device.
Or
Oh
Mac.
right, that was
Or Mac.
exclusive, huh? Wow. Yeah. Because totally on iOS 8, I downloaded into iBooks and the iBooks app crashed. Like I don't know, like I had to reboot the device before iBooks worked with iOS 8. But it was like extensions right out of the bat. It's like oh my gosh, like that's almost it's weird that Apple gets that bad rap of, oh my gosh, you finally brought something to us that we asked you and are crazy about the fact you didn't have forever.
Well, this was, in a lot of ways, this was, I don't want to call it a catch-up release, but there are things that developers have been asking Apple for forever. Apple hit.
Yep. It was like iOS
Almost
2,
all.
it was Exchange, right? There wasn't Exchange until iOS 2, but there were so many other features like, enterprise Wi-Fi that didn't come around until
Right. Yep.
iOS 2.
Yep.
And people said about that release that, okay, people want to use this at their business. People want to actually have apps instead of web apps. Like all those things they played catch up in iOS 2. And now with these things, there is kind of at least a renewed interest in an unloved part of the ecosystem of people wanting to extend the entire system. How they can actually make that happen.
Totally agree.
But
I
it
mean,
being cross-platform by default is huge.
yeah, I mean, I understand why they did it the way they did it. And again, sort of as an Android user, that was one of my big gripes, the sharing. That extensions answers. Like, Apple answered a lot of the gripes that I had about iOS. So,
Yeah,
you know?
I think it's going to be the biggest. I mean, iOS 7 was a huge aesthetic release, but I think iOS 8 is actually a much bigger functional release
Yeah, agreed.
in terms of what it enables.
I think they've kind of gone to the pattern that they have with their macOS releases, where like every other release is stable and every other release is like
It's more
yeah, exactly. Like
Bleeding
I
edge.
feel like Mavericks was like, well, you kind of were expecting something, so here's what we got, even though it didn't really work very well in almost any
I don't
regard.
know. I've been really happy with that.
Yeah.
I have had no
Stability,
difficulty
really.
with Calendars app, Contacts app, the default Mail app. Forget about it. Don't even get me started on the default Mail app.
Mail app's been pretty bad.
Mail app has always been awful.
So
Mail
yeah,
app in Mavericks is
Mavericks is great.
really
The
terrible.
crappy apps they ship with Mavericks suck. It's an
Overall,
OS.
I've been really happy with that.
I mean,
Yeah, we've been really happy next we don't use any of that stuff.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. I'm a
Right.
I bet you each of those developers behind those apps are very upset about it as well.
I wish.
Mail app has always been like great if you're a consumer and get like 3 emails a day. That is
Well,
ideal.
but if you compare Mail app in Mountain Lion versus Mail app in Mavericks, there is, I mean, as far as functionality is concerned, leaps and bounds difference, and Mavericks
Yeah.
went the wrong way.
Huh.
Like Mountain Lion Mail app is, comparatively speaking, rock solid, reliable. Mavericks Mail app, I can't find anything nice to say about it, except for the fact the program quits. That's the best part about it.
So as we're slowly moving on to the Mac side of things, there were good Mac announcements, and I guess the one that encompasses them both is new programming language. And my big curiosity, you sort of touched on it earlier. Does Swift change things for anybody? Like, has anyone been, for years thought, I can't get into Objective-C, but now you hear about Swift and think, oh, maybe I can do this.
Definitely.
Yeah, you think so? I'm
Well-
curious what's so different about it.
I mean, some of the tools that they showed off for making like iOS games, casual games, all that, they don't really touch on what I do, although I think that I will, as a consumer, benefit from a lot of those improvements. But as I kind of am starting to really delve into Python, largely because I want to start implementing Monkey at work, and so I thought just knowing Python better than I do now would be an important tool. As something sort of hit home with me about that as I was looking at all their comparisons to the speed difference between Swift and Python, because that was their benchmark at the keynote against which everything else was.
Ridiculous benchmark. That's the
Well,
one thing
yes.
that Tim Cook sort of, or his team that puts those slides together, whoever it is, they went back to this sort of
Jobsian
Jobs
kinda,
era of
yeah.
meaningless comparisons with no data to back it up or anything. So
There's some truth to it, even if it maybe isn't 200 and something to 1 or 122 to 1. I'm sure it's not 1 to 1 or.
yeah. But also you're comparing something that gets compiled to
Right.
something that's interpreted. It's really not a great comparison. In the chat room, Pine says Swift is definitely more accessible, less visual cruft compared to Objective-C. And then Nadewall comes along and says, but you still need to know some Objective-C, which I think he's right. Objective-C is not going anywhere for a long time. You know, Apple, they came along and said, hey, we have this great new programming language, Swift, and you should learn it. Oh, and we have this great new API today, Metal. It's all written in Objective-C. Yeah. So until Apple starts writing their own frameworks in Swift, you know,
which is probably coming. I mean, it's already.
I'm sure it's coming, but Objective-C is going to be around for quite some time.
It's a bit like the OS 10 to OS 9 transition, or the.
Yeah. So
there's a bit of legacy stuff that's still like stuck around from the old way, and eventually they'll.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Advance to the point where all the Objective-C code won't even run anymore. But that's probably 5 to 8 years out.
It might even be. I don't know. Who knows at Apple, right? They force deprecate stuff sometimes, but there's probably very little harm in them keeping the Objective-C runtime around and just keep running all this stuff. But has anyone tried Swift at all? Played around with it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I started to say, oh, okay, maybe I have absolutely no idea how Objective-C apps are made, because you really do need to feel the entire elephant before you can say, oh, okay, my entry point is here, that the way you need to build structures so that an Objective-C app can run, period. Like, I couldn't get Playgrounds going. Like, I'm just trying to build a gosh darn list and print a list, and Playgrounds was not responding in that way.
Early days, some of the stuff is just flat out. But
oh, yeah, I got nice error messages where it's like, Playgrounds crashed, but we haven't told you why we're bailing or that you are actually still functional. And I said, oh, okay, well then I can keep working, right? And then I'm still not actually getting anywhere with anything besides saying, oh, okay, this is not about Python where you get in and you can just get by with barely functions, you know? You can just do some functions and Python will get you a lot of the way there. Yeah. Whereas Objective-C, it seems, well, and programming in Swift as well, it's like classes are the model at which things interoperate in the first place. So that's how you're modeling your code, not in as small snippets.
Right, and I think to the other point, Python is certainly not quite going to go away yet. All the PyObc stuff that you can build on the command line, right now you can't do in Swift. So Swift has this nice -i parameter that will let run interpreted, so you can hash bang, XC run Swift, and have a script basically to go run. But you can't. If you do that, you can't import Cocoa, or you can't import any frameworks that are worth anything. So it's certainly not a replacement for PyObc at this point. Again, I'm talking about a language that's 2 weeks released in beta form. So who knows? By the time it's released, maybe that'll be in place. But
it would be
I don't
nice.
think it replaces Python in a lot of places. I mean, certainly on the
we have
Mac
an
side.
authoritative person in the Hangout who, if we could give him a mic, I mean, and Magravalp was like awake enough to want to share with us. He wrote a blog post about his early experiences with Swift.
Oh yeah, who's this?
Pear.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that in the chat room, just on that note, he said, PyObjective-C is not going away. In fact, the guy who is, the biggest proponent of continuing its development says this only gives me more of a reason to believe that it has a viable place. If they make the framework, a little nicer for Swift when it comes to the frameworks of Cocoa, maybe we get better hooks into that because Swift needs the same hooks.
Right, I agree. Swift will pick up more and more functionality, and I have no reason not to imagine that in the future.
The surface area for PyObjective-C to latch onto is possibly even more enhanced by Swift being a part of the ecosystem.
Yeah. First on the Hangout, if he wants to chat in, he should feel free to get a voice. But otherwise, I mean, we've played around with Swift enough that it's really tough to tell right now. There's certain things in the language I kind of like. There's other things that I've kind of made my hair stand on end a little bit.
I mean, it said functional programming, so that's cool, right?
But it's
what the kids are
it's
into.
time to file radars.
Oh yeah.
If we want this thing to get better and be part of the people who shape it, then it's time to experiment with it, find out what you like and what you don't like. What's buggy, you go file radars on.
There's a lot of unbridled enthusiasm in the podcast world and in the Mac, media world.
So Per did chime in on the Hangout chat.
Is anybody out there?
And he says, for me, Swift needs somewhere to go after Python PyFC. I didn't even bother with playgrounds, they just crash. You also need the dev tools installed to use Swift Dive, which is true. Family's sleeping, I can't use the mic. That's why he's typing instead of speaking up. But
it was because Greg saw him in his home.
Yeah, so PyFC is bridged, Swift is binary compatible with PyFC. It uses the same objects and runtime, so no help for PyFC, unfortunately. Swift framework will need to be bridged just the same. Yeah, so that's kind of the issue.
But if they're talking in the same way, then it's not that it's going to directly help PyObjective-C in any way by what they're doing in the frameworks, but at least interacting with them might be a little cleaner.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that some people are sort of inspired by it and think it'll help them dive in a bit. And
oh yeah.
I'd certainly like to see it become more useful and more sysadmins kind of dive in as a system sort of scripting language. I think that would be kind of cool. There are all indications pointing to it becoming open source, which I think will be really, really useful.
I don't know how likely that is.
Really? Why don't you think so?
Because Objective-C has stayed Objective-C. And no matter how Objective-C was inspired by Smalltalk, no matter how... Like the 10 years ago, would you think that in 2014, Objective-C would be behind Java and C? Comment that it was just like in Daring Fireball today.
Behind them in terms of what?
Just like as close as number 3 in popularity by somebody's metrics.
But that's because of iOS. Very clearly.
It's been marginalized on the Cupertino platform, right? And the fact that you can only then run that code on these devices. Swift, I don't know when people have Rust, when people have Go, that they need Swift to be open source. They need it to run on multiple platforms. I guess I'm mistaking open source for cross-platform or
it doesn't have to be
available to run on all platforms. Because without LLVM, it's not running anywhere either.
Right.
But LLVM is open source, but that's like saying Launch D is open source.
Exactly. There's a bunch of stuff.
There's no practical implementations anywhere else.
Precisely.
Which brings up Launch D, something else fun and exciting.
That is very exciting. So apparently someone else showed up, but by all means, please continue.
But I don't know how covered by NDA that is.
That's another interesting thing. NDA. Talk amongst yourselves.
I guess because I'm so garrulous, I'll lead conversations with out of the room.
I mean, I really don't even know what's covered under the scope of the NDA, really, off the top of my head, other than...
Well, non-developers accessing it is obviously the doors are wide open. And the fact that it's publicly available, all of the sessions, all of the slides that go along with those sessions. But
they're free.
Thanks, boss.
As far as the actual contents of the betas, I don't know what is and is not under.
I think you're not allowed to. I don't think that you're not allowed to discuss what's in the developer previews. I think you're not allowed to use it to do reviews or to create, to like share screenshots of the actual functioning thing. I think you can talk about what's in it.
Well, it's kind of weird, like the Mac randomization, right? So that's something that's been reported publicly. So it's now in an open forum that it's been rebroadcast in a way that I'm not filing an NDA, even kind of like open it up as, hey, these are the specifics of it. It was a throwaway slide on number 48, page 48 of what was going on about privacy. Like, hey, and this, by the way, we might make every guest network in the world freak the heck out. because they might say, hey, you might need a DHCP lease. If they're aggressive about handing out DHCP leases, you're going to deplete your pool when more than a couple of iOS devices running iOS 8 hit it.
Maybe,
So
maybe not.
The specifics of the implementation are still, hey, we'll see if it's the iOS 4 disaster of DHCP leases that never got released. I think that was when that happened. But that specific thing becoming public knowledge is okay. We're still like shy on how the actual implementation is going to be. I'm glad that at least now, like the good thing about not even talking about NDA, is Apple opening up publicly is I can send a link to my networking guy. I can give him that PDF
Well, like I said
directly, and it's not
earlier,
me
right,
breaking an NDA. It's him
All the videos
accessing
are
publicly available information.
Free.
Yep.
Not
Not behind any type of law auth.
So it would be really tough to. The NDA in the past, I found like I was always, we're under an NDA, I can't publish anything. And then of course there are tons of people publishing all, whatever they want. And
Nobody
the
getting
Apple
sued
police
over
didn't
it.
come over and say, oh, you can't have that here. So
Unless they didn't like what you said.
sure, but for the most part, the NDA hurt the people that followed the rules, and not the people who were breaking the rules.
Well, there's the two schools of thought regarding the liking what you said. It's one, are you going to affect my product being successful, versus the other is just you're spoiling our fun, right? I don't think there's a lot of spoiling of the fun when they did as open a keynote about all of this nitty-gritty stuff, like Dr. Dre's phone number.
Was that his actual phone number, by the way?
That was actually support. That's Apple's support.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna say.
And so people, of course, called in immediately afterwards and asked to speak.
Answering support calls.
He's working his way
Which is
up.
good.
Yeah.
I mean, he's clearly
He
T1.
needs to work
You don't
from
want him
home.
to be the guy that the phone call gets passed to. So.
In LA, traffic's horrible,
Right.
so he wants to telecommute. But yeah, supposedly somebody called up and they got the support line and they asked for Dre. And it's like, nobody else has called to ask for Dre today, so you're the first one. So yeah, let me get him for you.
So I know the guy whose email address was dre@apple.com.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's right.
He's getting a lot of mail now.
the Drenus is getting a lot of. Yeah, he tweeted, "Thanks for all the congratulations, but
That's
it's
funny.
the other Dre."
Yeah.
That email address now, he could probably wreak some havoc
So-
if he wanted to.
Yes,
You can do anything you want to it. You
Yeah.
want to stay at Apple.
Launch D. I think we can talk about that. Launch D version 2. Has anyone started poking around Launch D?
I only did what was recommended by people smarter than me, which is diff the man pages.
Well, diff the man pages, but even just looking at the help, there's a bunch of new stuff. There's a bunch of stuff that looks like they took away.
or said, hey, you weren't using this right.
Yeah.
Let's not have it be effective anymore.
Or there's just a different way to do it that doesn't work. And again, these are times you go file a bug and say, did you mean to do this? Or, do you think this works? Because it doesn't. But yeah, Launch D2. I think that's a good thing. We'll see how these small changes. Yeah, if you go into launch control, like the man page and things like that. Some good changes, some for the better, some we'll find out.
Is Launch
It'll
D?
break a lot of scripts, though.
Yeah.
Rely on. Yeah.
Scripts that aren't already broken by this one going up to 11, right? This one being .10. And people not writing that properly in their detection
Like
parts of the script.
little mini Y2K bug kind of style.
Is this greater than? No. I think it was actually Oracle was the first out of the gate with, hey, you can't run this. This isn't greater than 10.7.3. It's like, actually, yes, it is. You guys might not think it is, but we know why that is.
Yeah, that's some crappy code.
You pat Oracle on the head and say, we expected that from you, though.
Oh yeah, so speaking of Swift, the other change on the Mac is not only did we get Swift, but we got JavaScript as a scripting language
Automation,
for automation.
which is not JavaScript from a web browser. It is considered JavaScript 1.0.
Yeah. But it's still interesting. I mean, that
was asked like years ago. Was it?
Apple has used JavaScript in all these little odd places, like
Right, installer.
Installer scripts use JavaScript to do certain tests. But I think it's, again, that's open to a much wider audience than AppleScript was. And AppleScript is just like this sort of niche little thing that, like, it's sort of this ugly thing that's hung on for so long. But immediately, JavaScript gets access to all the same scripting bridges. Like, no one needs to update
Libraries,
their
yeah.
applications, right? They just can tie into the same dictionaries, which, I don't know, I think that's really interesting. That could be a really good thing for automation. And callable from the command line, blah, blah, blah.
It's weird though that it reminded me of the Google Python class. Nick Parlante, I think is the guy's name. He said that it was like a historical, there was a story there that the module's called shuttle, right? It's the shell util, but it does very specific things, and so it's not really applicable to call it shuttle, but like there's this historical footnote about it. And like JavaScript being in installer for the first part, in like dists and that like DOM and like all of that weirdness about and I'm using ZAR now and like it's kind of crazy, but it's like there's got to be a historical footnote somewhere of how that even started in the first place. But I remember
Sometimes it's just like the engineer who worked on it, that was their favorite language. Like they were responsible for implementing it, and all right.
Or more like they took somebody from the web objects team and they needed someplace to put them.
Yeah.
Something like that, There's got to be a historical footnote behind that. But there was someone, I think it was Flying Meat Software, I don't remember who it was years ago, quite specifically said.
JS script or JS talk.
I don't remember how it came up that it was on my radar at all, but they were like, hey, AppleScript is just doesn't have the uptake, it doesn't have the power, it doesn't have the community. Why don't we just toss this out and put JavaScript in its place?
That was fine.
And now it's happening. Like, wow. Like the fact that it has already been implemented, which obviously took years of work.
Right.
Is kind of
so
encouraging.
That sort of brings up another interesting point. Let me look at the chat before I move on, though. Rich Trout says, my existing launchd items worked fine. Yes, so when I say...
We don't scribble outside the lines,
Right, when I say it's going to break a bunch of scripts, I mean people who are using this functionality that got changed or the flags got changed. Pair confirms that, no broken launchd items yet. Rich reminds us that Safari extensions use JavaScript. So yeah, there's definitely more and more support for JavaScript.
That's kind of like saying Dashboard uses JavaScript.
Dashboard uses JavaScript, that's right. So they took away dash code, but you could still make Dashboard, which is you just have to do it all by hand, I guess.
I thought it was gone. How many OS releases ago was Dash Code gone?
Oh, gone. Wow.
Yeah.
Behind says Dash what? Dash Code was actually kind of cool. So yeah, that's what I was going to bring up then. So you mentioned Gus Mueller from Flying Meat had this idea for JS talk, JS script, I forget what he called it. And now it's happening. That was sort of the other theme of this keynote, right? Things getting Sherlocked. That, right? Like, oh, this
game falls into the mothership.
Oh, yeah. Was that? I'm trying to remember what got Sherlocked, but I don't think any of it was real.
Test Flight didn't necessarily.
No, Test Flight got bought by
Alfred,
but
got
nuked
look-alike at the very least.
Yeah, certainly looked alike. It looks like Alfred still has a
well,
lot
and
more functionality.
they were really pitching
using
Spotlight as a launcher, and like what features of Alfred did they not demo?
Clipboard history.
If you pay for
workflow. Yeah, so I've been a paying user of Alfred for a while. I love Alfred.
The basic stuff.
Do they still do Quicksilver? I feel like Alfred was kind of like a Quicksilver.
It kind of was. So I used to use Quicksilver back in the day, but I forget what release it was. Maybe Snow Leopard. Quicksilver didn't run on the betas, so I kind of just stopped using Quicksilver for a while, and I got used to not using it, and then Alfred came along. I was like, oh, this is even.
Yeah, I think they ceased development on Quicksilver. The guy got picked up by Apple or Google.
They came
He
back.
came to work for Google for a while. I don't know if he's still with Google, but then it went open source. So there is
So there was a community around it.
There's still development on the open source.
I loved it. I had no items in my dock. I just used that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how you use Alfred. I've got Chrome on my dock. That's it.
Yeah.
The other one I think you're thinking
And
of is
Alfred.
layers, which Sam Marshall was saying, like, before WWDC at all, he was like, why have you not, if you're into anything that involves a presentation layer in an Objective-C app, why are you not using layers? Because you can not only pull apart.
Oh, you mean a Reveal?
Reveal
or Spark app or whatever. Yes, that was the other one.
That was the one that they tweeted about how they didn't feel Sherlocked because you still can't do anything with those layers as they are exposed.
Yes, just like Alfred still has a little bit more functionality. I think Reveal still has a little more functionality than what Apple's shipping. However,
you gotta that's your
For now,
call
that's
to
true.
differentiate your product line.
right. Or if you
Nothing
think
could
you
be
need
clearer.
that extra functionality. Gosh, I remember there were a ton of things that were like, oh my gosh, I kind of got Sherlocked.
Well, I mean, people don't even remember, like, what was the Tweetbot developers had the clipboard sharing app, like, so long ago, and now AirPlay is finally moving in, well, really, continuity is moving into that space of, hey, you can move.
I didn't realize they had that.
So Macworld conveniently has an article about the things that Sherlock.
Oh.
So
Delicious.
first one on the list, cloud storage.
That was another big one.
Yep, the company's introduction of iCloud Drive is a clear shot across the bow products like Dropbox and Microsoft OneDrive.
It is, but it isn't, right? Because
It's just like
they're not it's not cross-platform.
It's
So
like
to me,
iDisk brought back from the dead. I mean,
Well,
But it's also
It will
be on
integrated in a way that Dropbox can never do. Like, I know that you don't use the mail app, but to actually be able to just drag like a 2 gigabyte video or hit attach and attach a 2 gigabyte video to an email and hit
Mailbox
send.
app. That's why Dropbox is
Yeah,
called
I can't-
Mailbox.
Well,
And
I
then
can't imagine I'm giving up Dropbox or Drive.
I don't imagine that either, but
Because
it's
it's just, there's so much more functionality there.
It's
And,
way
you know,
more
I
interesting
don't-
if they stay back, though. If they say, hey, this functionality is now a first-class citizen and not a private framework, and go to town, we're also going to do this,
Yes.
and they step up the competition, but you don't look at Apple and say, hey, Apple, why doesn't this work? They're moving into a space that there's already existing players, but at least they're letting those other players
Yes, it looks
get
like
legit, you know,
Yes.
not hack the Finder,
Right.
the other things that you kind of like want out of those third
That was actually
parties.
a new API.
Yep.
You could batch Finder items without just monkey batching Finder.
And cross-platform, right? And the fact that there's
Wow.
document-based apps become first-class citizens.
If you consider cross-platform,
Between
iOS and Mac.
Yeah.
Apple cross-platform,
Yeah,
Apple
Apple
cross-platform.
Intra-platform.
Yeah, to me, cross-platform means Windows or Android or even web.
Yeah,
Web is a different platform. If I can't get to it from the web, then
yeah.
kind of annoying.
easy
It's
enough
limiting,
to add
yeah.
another panel into that iCloud, whatever they call it, control panel, where you sign in now, you have access to pages, keynote, numbers, find my, whatever, all those things. I don't see it being much of an issue.
Does anyone
to
use
just
that?
throw another.
Use what?
Log into the web interface.
When I'm not on my computer and I need access to something that's in my files, yes, but few and far between.
For what? iCloud?
Yeah. For
What
like,
files do you
for-
get to store on?
I mean,
iWork?
you know, the
Oh, the
your
iWork
iWork
stuff.
files.
Really?
Yeah, I have, I think maybe a half dozen things that they're total. Because not many things has interfaced with it besides the Apple products themselves, and I don't really do much in the way of producing documents or presentations. So,
Yeah. All right.
but every now and then, and the Find My iPhone thing is handy if you're not around your computer. You can
Yes.
figure out where it is.
Well, it was originally the only way you could use Find My iPhone.
Yeah.
You had to log into the web interface.
What are some of the other things? to say?
Let's see, screen recording apps, which we already kind of talked about. Reflective.
Oh yeah, we use live view like
Oh.
crazy at work, and this is gonna replace
Yeah.
that totally.
Because we already touched on that, Alfred,
Delicious.
et cetera. Developer tools, we're talking about Reveal, we already talked about that. Beta app distribution, talked about TestFlight already, how Apple bought that. Photography apps, so all the ability to tweak and tune photos within the Photos app itself.
The extensibility they added though is also going to give them a whole new avenue to add, to add some
Filters,
functionality
et cetera.
to,
Yeah. To the
third
built.
parties will have an additional avenue of working with, the Instagrams of the world and whatever will have a much nicer tie-in to Apple's own.
It'll save you a step. instead of having
Potentially.
to go from one app to the
Yeah,
other.
right.
Yeah.
But that's,
That's big when each additional step is like you're losing 20% of the potential market for the app because it's like too many steps for them.
yeah.
Right. Versus like the Twitter app is all that people know of Twitter, right? If the Photos app is all that you know of photos on the iPhone, being able to get your hook in there by the fact that the person installed it because they want to view with it, that's valuable to them.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Let's see, markup apps. So they're talking about Sketch in particular. Things that allow you to draw, sign, and highlight all kinds of documents and attachments right within the app. I mean,
Big red arrows.
yeah, to me, I don't really see much value in that to begin with. The most I do, I think, in terms of manipulating PDFs or marking things up and sending it back is like a signature, which Preview does quite well.
Yeah. But now I don't have to even go into Preview. I can just type it right in there and hit reply or hit send.
Yeah.
It stays a step.
So in the chat, Per, I don't know what sparked this. He just wrote "Flash needs to die."
Oh yeah.
And I agree.
Even though Adobe agrees with him, I mean.
Right, but no, but the interesting thing there, I think, was the announcement. I don't know if anyone's tried it, but it works. Is that Silverlight is no longer necessary for Netflix.
Yes.
I didn't hear why. That's the part that I missed. Or how.
Netflix on every other platform has offered this HTML5 version of their stream. I guess they always felt on the desktop it's easier to record and whatever, so they kept it Flash.
It was some
But even like
protection.
on Chrome OS, it's HTML5. There's no Silverlight plugin on Chrome OS or Xbox. Well, I don't know what they're doing on Xbox, but like PlayStation 4, there's no Silverlight running the Netflix app.
Is that how they achieve the additional battery life, the additional couple hours of battery life while watching Netflix videos in particular? Remember they highlighted
Most
that
likely.
feature
Yosemite, they mentioned
in
it.
Yosemite, yeah.
Probably. Because there's no Silverlight.
How
it's
redheaded
HTML5.
redheaded stepchild would Silverlight optimizations be to Microsoft? Like they're not worried about Silverlight on the Mac.
So
they already put a bullet in its
I
head.
don't even work.
But they did work with Netflix to keep the DRM
Right.
in place.
So that was what was added. Now I remember.
So that was added in Safari for Yosemite. But I thought that was awesome. So kind of a Sherlock, but not quite, or a lessening. But we're still not away from Flash.
Kind of reducing the stack, if anything. Like you already rely on so many other programs.
Moving parts,
Yeah, to do what you need to do. So
the less-
just kind of like an extra step.
The less crap I'm loading on my device, the better.
Yeah.
And Per is confirming that, yep, HTML5 instead of Silverlight was the source of those 2 hours of battery.
The next one is messaging apps. So they're saying that messaging apps are getting Sherlock like Skype and Facebook and WhatsApp. I also agree that's no way.
Yeah, but the Snapchat use case they're trying to at least address due to the fact that the Messages app that they say is the most popular on their gosh darn platform. That gets the most use on the iOS devices for those teenagers that are
kids and just flat out they
use whatever their friends are using for the messaging.
So they use WeChat and Kik, and Kik, right?
There's
Everyone
so
knows
many of them that are around. So
yeah, and you just use what your friends are using.
I use what my wife's friends in Japan use,
which is
WeChat? No, which is Line.
Line. Oh, that was one I was thinking. They sell stickers.
Because they have the stickers.
Right. No, I'm saying but that's not Apple saying this. This is an opinion in Macworld. So
they're certainly trying to compete in the space. It's not necessarily that they're removing that business's,
Right. And again, though,
viability.
I think all of those other applications that you mentioned, like Skype and WeChat and Kik, and all, they're in place because they're cross-platform. That's the big win for them.
I think what they're trying to do with some of these things, they haven't completely Sherlocked some of them. I think what they're trying to do is at least reduce the benefit gap. So like the differences in functionality between iOS, which comes on your phone, and WhatsApp. It's like, well, they're not that
right,
much
but
different.
as soon as I could get a new iPhone and not install anything, and as soon as that person says, hey, I want to chat with you, about this thing that's upcoming, and I use Skype, boop, I'm installing Skype. That's, or I'm installing WeChat or Kik, or whatever the heck it is.
But I think that's what they're trying, that's what they're going for.
FaceTime is kick-ass, though.
FaceTime is
Amazing.
great, but not everyone. Remember Apple was going to make.
Hey, but
FaceTime
my
a bit,
definition
but
of
they-
cross-platform.
I mean, FaceTime is good, but I think there's room for improvement there, just like with their messages and like how messages get delivered to your devices at 3 different times. And when someone FaceTimes your computer, all your stuff rings. It's like, you know that I'm using my computer.
Yeah, but I'm so miserly with how I'm
Yeah,
signing
well,
into each
from-
device.
Why?
You
Why
don't-
All these platforms, GChat,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
Hangouts
Yeah,
app,
but
and,
that's-
like,
that's-
so totally unreliable when and same thing with messages and Google Hangouts / GChat, whatever the hell they're calling it now, and yeah, it's predictably unreliable that I'm sitting at my desk whether this will beep or not.
It depends on whether
your
iMessage is in the
Yeah.
foreground.
So-
That's
No,
what
it
depends
doesn't.
on. No?
Yeah.
But it
Okay, so
shouldn't.
that's reliable. But if it's in the background, it's not reliable whether this will beep and when this will beep. Sometimes it happens
Yeah,
right
I never
away.
understood
Sometimes
that.
it happens 10 seconds later. Sometimes it happens a minute or two later.
And sometimes I think that has a lot to do with like
Yeah, and people were saying that
mapping and
it lies
and
on
how
the
often
push
it's using
notification service,
battery.
and I'm like, how?
Yeah,
Push
I don't
notification
know.
service works with like no service whatsoever. I get notifications, and I
I
can't
will
actually
say-
see the rest of the data.
Yeah, right?
When I was using this iPhone for, the 2 to 3 weeks that I was using it, starting off on 7 and moving to 8, notifications was consistently the one place I can't tweet them like I tweet them on my Android. And
Yeah.
on my Android, notifications is still the most kick-ass thing about Android, in my opinion. Like, there's no better system. They fire from the OS, not relying on push notifications. And like, I never miss anything on my Android. Flat out never. Whereas the iPhone, I could never tweak the notifications to get it to show me. That was the other thing
The right
that thing
thing,
about iOS is the divorcing of settings from the app.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
some apps have
Yeah.
settings in the app, some have them in Control Center or the settings app.
Some have both.
Some have both.
Yeah.
That's the most frustrating disconnect in apps.
It's very
Like,
un-Apple-like to do it that
really
way
is,
too.
because
Is it the
That's-
hamburger? Is it the gear? Is
Right,
it
so
the...
some apps, you go into the app, it's like, oh, what type of notifications do you want? But then you still have to go to settings, notifications, and say, I want these notifications on the lock screen or in my notifications drawer.
There was that
They should
single
allow
serving
Touch
site.
ID to kind of like, or whatever your passcode to be able to
Yeah.
enable it from within the app. It seems
Yeah,
to
I
me
don't
like
see
it's a
why that's a bad
sandboxing
idea.
of sorts. You know what I mean? Like they don't want to give the app the functionality to change something that's inherently inside of settings at a more
Maybe.
I think
more
this is
core level.
more of a UI idea when they started out that all your settings are going to be in this one place.
Right.
You're
Now
always
it's
going to
just
go
too-
to settings. And then it's like, well, but that doesn't always work, and so now maybe sometimes,
And
also
that was
now
before
there's-
there was third-party apps.
Yeah, it
and,
didn't really-
Like now there's this
Didn't really-
gigantic list.
yeah.
Yeah,
Crap.
yeah, it's out of control.
That's the one thing I've gotten in the habit of with iOS, is on Android, when it says, oh, these things have updates, there's an update and there's an uninstall button.
Yeah.
Which I love. So on Android,
Yeah.
like every now and then I'll get an update for something like, I never use that. I have to go home screen,
Yeah.
hunt it down, and look, just get rid of it.
That's one of
I
the
try
few
to
things I like
uninstall
better
things.
about Windows than the Mac. There are very few.
Oh,
But the uninstallability
yeah,
for
yeah.
everything is built right into the OS through the control panel, which is a huge improvement over trying to like go on somebody's website and
It's also
find their uninstaller
Way more
or
necessary.
dig through the
Windows to be
launch
able to
daemons
install
folder. Yeah, well, yeah. Way more necessary is why it got better, but
Yeah.
I wish that Apple would copy that model a little bit.
So there's a single serving website. Settings are in the settingsapp.com. But that's not quite. That's still very iOS 2 at the moment.
Yeah, it's the original iPhone that's up there.
And obviously the conversation has not ended in iOS 2 that Apple has an issue with how they're letting third parties.
So good. Any other
Configure.
secrets or things we missed or interesting things from the announcements or anything?
We missed
HealthKit.
the one last thing
Oh.
was Sherlock, supposedly. And I hate this term, the Internet of Things. Sherlock with HomeKit.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't mind the term, and I don't know if it was Sherlock. I think that's
Yeah, I
something.
don't think so.
It's an interesting place for them to jump into.
Seems very
I just think that
logical.
there's
It
a
seems
better way
really
to do it.
logical. It
Yeah,
seems
they
really
needed to get
interesting.
there and clean it up because it's just there's too much all over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing, again, is more of a consumer thing with HealthKit. It's an interesting place for Apple to kind of jump into.
Yeah, and
I'm
it's
interested to see where that goes.
well. There's a one more thing that is coming probably sometime in a few months. That HealthKit was like oh, by the way, all the rumors are true. It's right here, HealthKit. Like that's
We'll
what.
see. I mean, like I think the M7 processor on it is really
That was
5
another
and
hint
above
too. That was a hint too, but
will be a big piece of that because that. If you carry that around with you all the time,
Yeah.
it'll do, stairs, it'll detect.
Well,
but
your
HealthKit has
steps.
like heart rate built
Yeah.
into it, and you need a wrist device to do that.
They might want to leave some of that as a third-party opportunity. Right?
I'm sure Nike is
Nike.
chomping at the opportunity, and Fitbit, and
Fitbit and all
those
those
guys. Yeah, but
Polar. There are a bunch of these heart rate monitors and things that exist already. So Apple might want to just leave it for them to shove things into.
But Ed needs to catch a train, so I'm gonna before he leaves, I'm gonna say activity tracing, and that's all I'm gonna
You
say.
say what?
Activity tracing.
Oh yeah.
Holy crap, activity tracing. Holy crap, activity tracing. That's like the second coming of D-Trace.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah,
that I'm really
what is
looking forward
activity
to.
tracing?
So you'll watch the video, I hope, and you'll see how cool activity tracing is
It's
going
one of
to
the
going to
conference
be.
sessions or whatever.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
And
There's
it-
more good stuff for systems in this release, I think.
And it's like
It's a shame.
27 minutes in, they say, hey, this is how it's going to be applicable for us right out of the gate. Like, it's not us who are writing the apps necessarily, but how we can, hey, I'd like to tap right into that system.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
There's a lot of stuff I feel like that. Like if you download all the videos and sit through all of them, everyone's got a kernel of it's got its 3-minute period. And you're like, oh, I could use that.
Yep.
The other 47 minutes, I really snore, but that was really good.
If you have some extra time, which you must have a ton of, and you could just edit all those 3-minute clips together,
Yeah.
that would be amazing.
That's probably
Everything that was right with WWDC,
Yeah.
9 minutes.
Yeah. No retransmission or whatever.
See you tomorrow. Before we wrap up, we always kind of wrap up with events, activities. I know Penn State's coming up. All these announcements should make that a super interesting time, super interesting conference. I don't think anyone has had time to change their talk. But there will be plenty of hallway conversation. I'm really disappointed I'm missing the event this year, but I'll be traveling with my family. But I will, of course, be around for MacTech conference. If anyone wants to submit a talk or proposal, please chat with me about that.
Where is that?
LA.
LA, November 5th through 7th. Rich followed up on chat with, I was surprised at what was left out of the WDC videos. I didn't see anything about FileVault 2 or file systems in general. And he's right, as some people have been noticing that Yosemite uses a different AFP compression method. So if you target disk mode a Yosemite machine
To a
10.9 or earlier machine, you can't read the disk.
Oh, wow.
So again, early days, who knows where that's going to go. I presume it'll turn into, they'll update the framework in 10.9 to either work with 10.10 or at least recognize it and give you some reasonable message.
I would guess that
Remember back-
10.10 will have some more like some translator that can talk to. It can recognize the device at the other end and send along the.
Well, it's not a problem going the other way. You
Right.
can mount 10.9 from 10.10.
Yeah.
You can't mount 10.10
from 10.9 and open encrypt.
Like HFS and HFS Plus.
That's
Oh,
what
I
I was
see.
just thinking. I'm assuming Apple
Norton
just-
and Norton Utilities used ran it
Oh.
to do a repair or diagnosis on an HFS Plus disk. It would just wipe it.
Right, but then Apple added the wrapper.
Problem solved.
And when you tried to mount that disk, it would say like, oh hey, you can't do this. So at least gave you some sane way to deal with it,
For sure.
which was kind of cool.
Everybody's still hoping that someday somebody will come around to using like ZFS on the Mac side, but never gonna happen. Is right.
Although someone was trying to have come come out with a
Yeah.
commercials
Version.
CFS for OS 10 or something.
something like that.
Yeah.
And, I just don't see it
If they
being able to gain traction from a third party.
If they
No,
Swift
no,
HFS
not.
Plus, oh gosh, that would be awesome. That would be something that I don't expect them doing for a couple years, because it's not iOS 8. That's not iOS benefiting right out of the gate. You know?
Yeah, I'm not sure what benefit it gets them. Like all the core storage stuff got them a little further along. I don't know that they have to come along and change their actual file system.
The post that was like cleanup after the EFI transition, right?
Yeah.
And the Intel transition mostly, but the EFI transition they needed to say, hey, PGP is just needs to die a death. So let's help it into the grave a little bit. Let's give it a little push with first-party full disk encryption. The rest of what could be enabled, I don't know they're going to get there with HFS Plus. So they got to transition at some point. It's just you never can tell how short-term on the horizon it is.
Yeah. Well, that's Apple. They're never gonna
show their hand. Yeah.
Any release of like a server 4.0 app yet? Is that already built into the
preview.
DP1
That's
of
preview already.
Any,
it's a
any
separate-
big changes there?
I have no idea.
Has anybody played with it at all?
No.
It's a separate standalone app that can be installed just like.
If you have a developer account, go.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I will.
funny as well because they're not distributing it through the Mac App Store.
Yeah, you're
It's a
right.
separate download, just like 8conf.
And
a separate
Xcode
download.
6 is just for now, it's just a go download thing.
Which is like 6 gigs.
It was big, but
It needs some weight. Like, wow.
Yeah, I don't know how much to the framework.
Yeah, Swift's got to have something to do with it.
I mean, LLVM, though. LLVM is what's under the covers that makes it really run. So I don't know how much needed direct modification to enable it. It's not like it's.
Okay. So before we
getting-
wrap up, I'll just read the chat room. For those interested, Rich Stratton says Apple did add a nice feature to FTE setup in Maverick, so I posted about it on his blog.
The link father.
In the tip forums, what I'll do is I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah, he did.
Ryan Manley says FreeBSD effectively forked ZFS, so it should be relatively clear from licensing issues if they went for that. I'm pretty sure. I'm not a lawyer. Apple has much better lawyers than me. Rich Trouton also says, unfortunately, Fireball 2 is busted in VMware Fusion for Yosemite, so I can't test it at this point. Yeah. Yeah, Rich, you probably have a spare machine you can install this on.